What's up, everybody? My name is Brianna Broad, and I'm from Southern Indiana. And my win is I got a full-time copywriting position with benefits after only 1 week of starting the course. And now here's the show.
Oh my gosh, Brianna, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yay.
please keep us posted on how it's going in the group.
Absolutely.
Very exciting.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone, to the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Today, we are going to talk about roles, as in the people that you will interact with as a copywriter. Now, not in every situation, right, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking more about when you're working with, whether it's an agency, whether it's a team at a business, not so much when you're working one-on-one with a solopreneur or a small business owner. Mm-hmm. So this is more of, I would say small, mid to large size organization, depending on your definition of small. Small Business Association says small businesses are under 500 employees, which is quite large. So anyway,
yeah. This is semantics.
Yeah.
And two, I have worked in scenarios where I'm working with an agency and they need a quick copy turnaround. So they just want me to send the copy. Right. So I don't really get a chance to interact with the agency or the company, which, not my favorite, but hey, I'm happy to write the copy for them.
Yeah.
But so
this depends on the project too. I mean, I think content writers too will find that maybe they do a little bit less interfacing with some of these roles versus copywriters, where we might encounter this. I'm sure everyone at some point in their career will encounter some, if not all, of these roles.
Absolutely. And so what we wanted to do today was to make sure you know who the heck these people are. When they say, okay, great, you're going to sit down with the project manager, you don't go, super, so excited to do that. And then in your head go, who's a project manager? What's a project manager? What does that do?
What do I ask them?
Do I
just sit and listen quietly?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. I can get reprimanded?
So actually, let's start with the project manager. What is a project manager, Kate?
Project managers are some of my most favorite people in an organization, some of the most useful people. And I don't think I quite understood how useful these folks were.
Bless the project managers. Yes.
So these folks, and I think why I'm so drawn to them is because their brains work generally very different than mine. They're a little more organized. They're on top of things. They're the folks that are keeping your project on track. So they are in charge of the full project. So if you're coming in as the copywriter, let's use creating a website as an example. There's a lot from the start of that, whether it's an internal website, whether they're interfacing with the client and figuring out, okay, if we need to launch this website by X date, how does everything fit in? And how do we make sure we have enough time to review things for revisions, quality control, and to check things? And so their minds are really good at taking that big, giant project and breaking it down into all the tiny steps and all of the dates that need to get hit to make sure that they hit that end date.
Exactly. I've heard it sometimes called a traffic manager, a traffic coordinator, which is basically like, if you think of the idea of a bunch of projects being on a road together, the traffic coordinator, the project manager who's literally managing the project exactly is being like, okay, you're going to go through, you're going to pause, all that kind of thing. And part of what makes it so magical, this role, is because when you are working on multiple projects for a company, like one project can be a lot to manage anyway, and the project manager will be the person to come through and go, okay, this is falling a little bit behind. Are you still on track to get to deliver copy by this date, that kind of thing. They're fantastic. But when you are doing a lot of different projects within the same company, invariably they're going to be, oh, this project needs to be done right away. But we're also still working on this project. And you're writing both of these, but obviously you're just one human being. And the project manager, the traffic manager, you can come to them and say, okay, I'm one person, which is more important? What do I need to do first? And they'll go back and figure it all out. And they will also come to you and say, okay, your deadline for this is here. Is that still doable? All of this chaos that is going on sometimes with multiple projects, they They calm it all down.
They help you prioritize. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a fantastic position. And it's the same thing too, is sometimes they will bring you details of a project. If it's a small project, they're not doing a full kickoff on it because maybe it's an iteration of something else. They give you the details. And if you're like, I don't know what that is, or this is something new to me, can you go back and get that information? They will do it because they want to make sure that you can move along and get that work done.
Yeah. And often they'll be the ones coordinating and setting those meetings to make sure everyone's on the same page. Say, okay, I think we need to regroup and let's get in the room with the designer and you. And often if they attend some of these meetings, sometimes they won't, sometimes they will. But they're very good at kind of deciphering what everyone's saying and making sure, you don't just leave the meeting and say, okay, we're good. And they say, no, like, here's next steps. Here's what needs to happen. And they're very good at kind of, like you said, putting that order to the chaos. And just like, Nicki mentioned, they can say, hey, this is still the date that we need you to hit. Can you still make it? These are the folks you're going to want to go to if you're feeling like, ooh, time crunch. Can I get an extra date? Do we have flexibility in the schedule to give myself another half day? Or the internal review for this project is on this date. Can we do it the following morning or whatever it is? You're going to want to communicate with them with those types of scheduling questions and raise your hand sooner rather than later. So if you kind of see in the future that this might be a problem, go to them and have that conversation so that you can make sure everything's on track and they can get another resource if needed. I think none of us like to raise our hand and say, we're overloaded. We like to say, nope, we can do it all. I can tackle it. Like, don't worry. When what's best for the organization is to have that, I want to say vulnerability. I don't know if that's quite, it's more of an extreme word. But
honesty, right?
Yeah.
And self-knowledge.
It's not going to make you look bad at all. I think people are going to all be grateful that you raised your hand and said, nope, I need someone to kind of help out on this pinch hit.
Well, and likely if you're feeling it, that maybe other people on the team may be feeling it as well. And so maybe you also want to loop in the creative director, that kind of thing. But yeah, absolutely. Never be afraid to talk with your project manager, your traffic manager to make sure that it can all stay on track.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then they can identify, if they need another copywriter to write some piece of the project to help you out, they can have more time to figure out who that person would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So product manager sounds a lot like project manager. Very, very different. What does a product manager do, Kate?
Yeah. And as we mentioned before, you're not always going to have all these people. So product manager might not be someone, I would say, right off the bat versus project manager, you're probably going to interact with them sooner rather than later. Product manager, they're in charge of doing kind of figuring out the strategy for whatever product it is you're selling. So let's use a website again as an example. If they feel like this website maybe they want to test different buttons on the website to see if that improves the click-through rates say it's a purchase page, see if it improves the purchase just by changing the button, maybe the color, maybe the style. They're always looking for ways to improve whatever it is that they are in charge of, whatever product it is. So it might be a full brand. It might be, what else could it be?
It could be a literal product, if it's a toy company, they might be in charge of like the Sally Sleeps a Lot brand. This is why nobody ever was like, you should design toys. But they're in charge of Sally Sleeps a Lot, and they're in charge of like, okay, well, we're going to roll out a Sally Sleeps a Lot duvet set. And so we have to kick off the project, and they're in charge of giving you all of the input. And okay, well, we're going to need a landing page for the Sally Sleeps a Lot. We're going to need new packaging for Sally Sleeps a Lot, the duvet set. I love this. I guess I really want to sleep in this weekend, I guess.
Not a very fun toy if it just sleeps a lot, but
you just poke at her, try to wake her up, but she doesn't. She just sleeps a lot. But so the product manager manages the product. And again, it could be a literal physical product. It could be a website, or it could be a portion of a website. If it's a very, like Amazon, for example, is a massive website. I guarantee that they've got
product managers,
hundreds, if not maybe even thousands of product managers, but who all who manage their own small portion of it, like I'm sure there might be multiple levels of product managers at a place like Amazon, but someone I'm sure is in charge of the affiliate pages and the affiliate program, and someone else is in charge of exactly
and the music, and then the Amazon Fresh and all the different products. I think it's sometimes, I like the Sally Sleeps a lot for a physical product. I think it's sometimes a little harder to wrap your head around a product being all of these less tangible things like a portion of a website or a digital product. But if you can start thinking about it like that, that's absolutely real helpful. So if you have a question, I think that's a good, if you're in an organization that maybe has layers of a website, let's use Amazon again. If you have a question about Amazon Fresh or an idea, I guess, say you have an idea, you say, "Ooh, what if we tried this? This could be a really good way to, send an email about this new thing that we're doing." You'd want to go to the specific product manager that's in charge of whatever idea you have, whatever kind of vertical that you want to pitch your thoughts.
Absolutely. So
which
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I feel like they would welcome that. I think, sometimes as copywriters, we like to stay in our lanes and just execute on our tasks and say, okay, we take what, the creative brief from these folks and say, okay, I'm just going to go execute. Here's the copy. But again, if you're looking for a way to be a really great partner to whatever organization you're working in, then definitely raise those ideas as you come up with them.
Absolutely. Completely agree. So usually the product manager is, not always, it depends a little bit on how the organization is structured, but the product manager is probably going to be the one doing the kickoff. If it's for changes to the product or something like that. So if they want to test new copy lines on a landing page or something like that, they'll be leading the kickoff, and they'll be that key stakeholder, the person who, when you're presenting your work, you'll be presenting it to that product manager, and they'll be giving you feedback and working with you and all that kind of thing. Now, marketing manager. And when we say manager, know that it could also be like director, and same thing with product. But marketing manager, kind of like the other side to that coin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to be, looking at things like branding first and foremost, especially when it comes to you and your design partner coming up with something and making sure whatever you come up with is in line with the brand guidelines and matches kind of what they want to show to the world. But those folks also might be the ones that kind of pinpoint areas that you might not have thought of like, ooh, here's why we don't want to use this language, or here's why we need to shift this idea because the perception of our audience, if they saw this, they're going to be folks that you might ask a lot of questions to, depending on, if you have a creative director, they might be the folks you go to first for creative questions. But, if you have a higher level strategy question of why this is happening or what we're doing and how it fits into the bigger picture of the business, you might go to your marketing manager and kind of dig deeper to understand what the project's purpose is.
Yeah. And they're thinking in terms of branding and promotion. So it's also completely conceivable that a marketing manager could kick off a project if, for example, there is a new website and the product manager manages that website. So they might be included in the kickoff, but the marketing manager says, okay, we've got a new website. So we need to put together some promotional elements. We need to email our current list of subscribers to tell them about this new website. We need to create some promotional elements. We need to create some banner ads. We need to all kinds of things. So when it comes to promotional projects, the marketing manager is going to be in charge of those kinds of projects. And the marketing manager and the product manager kind of have to work hand in hand. They have to be, it's beneficial if they're kind of friendly and they understand each other's objectives, because in a promotional project, the marketing manager, so many words with the same beginning letters, promotional project, the marketing manager is going to really own that and be the key stakeholder. But they're probably also going to want input from the product manager. And the product manager is savvy. When they're kicking something off, they might loop in the marketing manager too, just to get their take on it. Okay. And then next, and again, this is not in order of importance. This is not even necessarily, who you're going to work with in what order. We're trying to stick to that, but it's a little bit tricky because you work with a lot of people at once. But a UX designer, what does UX stand for, Kate?
Oh, yes. User experience. And sometimes you'll see UI, which is user interface. And I feel like those two things are slightly different, but, you know, kind of in similar worlds. But UX designer might be if one exists for the project, and oftentimes they might not. But if they do, so to use the website example again, they might wireframe out how this web page or entire website, if they're doing a website, is going to look. So they might create.
And Kate, what's a wireframe?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you. I know, I forget lingo that I just know now. Wireframe. Oh, it's like an outline, I guess, for the site. So it's a very, if you stripped all of the words and the images put it into grayscale, you could see the navigation, you know, at the top that has the home, about, whatever navigation in the menu, and then the header, and it would have lorem ipsum text, which is literally lorem ipsum spelled out. And then,
exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, it's to your point, Kate, it looks kind of like boxes on a page or just frames. If you think of it as kind of like a gallery wall, right? But there's nothing in the frames yet. It's this section here is where we'll put a sign up. This section here is where we'll put a header. This section here is where we'll put a call out to whatever else, or this section is going to have a button and a link. And especially with a more complicated website, you know, to go back to an Amazon or something, can you imagine how complicated it is to design those websites? So it's kind of like going in with a map, and then you and your designer will go in and fill in those sections. And then too, there's a UX designer may help you with understanding where they go when they click a button, or even on a page. Sometimes there are interactions that happen on a page, you know, say for example, you're using something that lets you like mock up your living room, right? Maybe mock up is a little bit technical too, but I got new furniture for my basement and I was like, I don't even know how to figure out what this looks like. So, I found a program that lets me kind of move a sofa in and move it. That's a lot happening on that page. And there were a lot of buttons for me to use. So a UX designer thinks through, okay, this button does this and this button does this. And that all happens that can all happen on one page. So a UX designer really helps you think through all of the entire user experience, which yes, it probably should be UE, but it's in the industry, it's UX.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like a blueprint. Like you were mentioning, you know, the house, the sofa analogy here. So if you think of it like living room, bathroom, kitchen, very similar. And so you know what content's going to go where. So you don't have to figure out, well, what do I have to say and where do I have to say it? You kind of know. Here's where our value proposition's going. Here's where we're going to talk a little bit about our story. Here's where we're going to talk about this product and why it's so great. So it's really helpful if you do have one of those folks on the team. Yeah. And then if you don't, totally fine. More on you a little bit. So factor that into your time, whether you know that someone's going to be kind of wireframing this out for you, or if not, then you're going to kind of want to do an outline for yourself and really figure out. And quite frankly, for a project like that, like a website, you wouldn't do this necessarily for every type of project, but a bigger project like a website, do an outline, say, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking headline here. I'm thinking this section will talk about this. This section will talk about this. And this one will talk about this. And we'll have here where the CTAs might be throughout, and get that signed off by your client first so that you don't spend a ton of time writing a whole website to have them say, oh, no, we want to talk about this here. And we want to talk about this here. If you can nail down, I always say, if you know what you want to say where, it makes it a lot easier to then go and do how you want to say it.
Fill it in.
Yeah, exactly. So that strategy and the thought process is going to take you probably just as long as actually writing it. And your designer might be able to help with that as well. So you might sit down with them and say, hey, what are you thinking? But often I find the designers let the copy kind of guide how the content is going to be laid out.
Yeah. And before we get to designer, I think that's a really great point that I want to make sure we emphasize, is that you don't have to wait until the first creative review to go back and ask questions, or to show an outline if you're not completely positive of the messaging, that kind of thing. Obviously, you want to get as much information in that kickoff as you possibly can, but there are going to be times when you kind of don't know everything until you start digging in and pulling stuff out. And like you were saying, Kate, if you create essentially an outline of what messaging and where you think it will go, and you think, I think this is it, but I don't want to go too far down that road, then you check in with the product manager or with the marketing manager, depending on the project, and say, hey, I just wanted to have you take a look at this and just make sure before I start fleshing out all the copy for this, that this makes sense. This is not the actual copy. Little tip, you often have to remind people of that. If you show anybody any words that's not the actual copy, you have to say to them, yes. They're going to be like, yeah, I don't like this. No, this is not the actual copy.
That's what I wouldn't even write copy if you can help it. Just say headline here, and then this is what this will be about. This will speak to, and do it literally typing sentences.
Headline about benefit to, yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So your designer, I think design is probably a little bit clearer. And we even recorded a whole podcast episode about it. So we definitely recommend you go check that out. We recorded it with one of our friends, Yoav, who Kate and I both had the opportunity to work with. He's a fantastic designer and gives a lot of insight in that episode. But your designer, and I should say your designers potentially, because there are often more designers on a team than there are copywriters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the last in-office jobs I had, it was me, and then 4.5, because one was, part-time contract. So that's a lot of design to copy ratio.
Well, and that's, the thing is that in general, there's a lot of designer to copywriter ratio, but there is usually so much more that needs to be designed for a couple of pieces of copy. Now, I'm not at all saying that design is harder, or that, and we all know that those couple of lines of copy can be hard to write. And sometimes it's hard to write stuff, even if it's harder to write stuff that's shorter. But yeah, the ratio often works out that there are more designers than there are copywriters. There are some scenarios where that's a little bit different. If it's a very copy heavy company or something along those lines. But generally you'll find that you have more designers, but that's kind of fun, because then you get to work with different designers on different projects.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then above that, creative director.
Yes, this is generally, if there one exists, they'll probably be the person you're reporting to. They'll also be a great resource. They can generally, I would say, I would love a stat on this, if more come from an art director background, or if more come from a copywriter. That's what I think. Occasionally you'll find a creative director that has a copy background. I think that's way more rare. I don't have the data behind it. We'll look it up and we'll see if we can add it to the resource section. But anyway, so regardless, these will be folks that can see the big picture, have probably, think of things that maybe you wouldn't have. They'll be giving you the first round of feedback, and frankly, even the second round of feedback, depending on the project, before you get to the creative review with the other stakeholders we mentioned, like the marketing manager, the product manager. And they'll push it to a place that, frankly, you don't want to push it to you on your own and can't push it to on your own. So for folks, I know the first time you might get some feedback where you're like, oh, I didn't knock it out of the park on the first try. That's what they're there for, because otherwise some of the best things you see wouldn't have gotten to the place that they got to. You can only do so much, I was going to say alone, but even with a designer, there's only so much you can do. And the more minds you bring into a project, the better it's going to come.
Exactly. Some of the best pieces in your portfolio will come from working with a good creative director. When you turn in work and they're like, okay, great, let me see more options. Okay, great. Let me see more options. Okay. And you're like, how can I just did like 3 rounds of options for you? And then it's on that fourth round that you're like, oh, this is so good, But, and to your point, I do find that more creative directors come from a design background than a copy background. I'm not entirely sure why that, probably just because there are more designers out there than there are copywriters, ratio wise. But a good creative director, even if they come up even if they have a design background, by the time they get to the creative director level, they have a good understanding of copy and they can give good feedback on copy. And remember too, it's a creative director. So they're not often going to hop in and actually like redesign something or rewrite something. That's not really their role. And I've had some good creative directors that have come from a copy background too. And they have a really great mastery of copy, but still have a good understanding of design. So they can give feedback on both of them.
You're going to find they ask a lot of questions. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you tried this? Often it won't be prescriptive, if they're good and they're pushing you to, they're not going to say, hey, how about you change this to this color? Maybe they will. Or if you change, they're not going to write the copy for you, is all that's to say. Mm-hmm. They're going to give you questions that you need to go back. And I think there's a temptation to go back and immediately rewrite, here it is, and present it. Take your time when you get that feedback from them. It's meant to think and really go back to the concepting phase, even if you have to say, okay, I have this here. They asked this question. What if I approached it from a completely different angle? So take your time when they ask those sorts of things. And again, I think there's an instinct too to answer them, to say, hey, have you thought about this? Well, yeah, I did, but here's why this is this. Approach it more of, yeah, I considered this with this, but maybe I can go back and let me think on this a little bit more and see if I can push it further. And you might also have, beyond the creative director, an associate creative director, an ACD. And so generally you might find there are actually more copywriters in these roles. You might have a copywriter ACD, you might have a design ACD. And so these folks can really help you kind of refine and still push you kind of in certain ways as the creative director. They're not going to have the ultimate kind of decision-making authority over the creative, but they will be able to they're in this in-between thankless role. I really appreciate ACDs because I feel like they take a lot from the CD and potentially, if you're in an agency, the account folks and the which we can get to, product folks, and just taking a lot of input, and then kind of working with the creative team to make the best thing possible. So they're in a very thankless position in that they kind of don't have full power, but they're also not necessarily executing like you are. And they're just in this in between. So great resource though, to again, push you to get that creative to a better place, to get you to think about things you might not have thought about.
Absolutely. And you will tend to see ACDs on bigger teams. And part of the reason is when you have a team of like 10, 15 people, as will happen at bigger companies, they can't all report to the creative director. The creative director can't possibly give feedback on that. So the ACDs exist to give you that initial round of feedback. And sometimes they'll manage projects for themselves. It depends on the creative director, it depends on the size of the team, the way the organization works. But it's think of it's a manager and an assistant manager, and the assistant manager has their team underneath them. But yeah, a good ACD can help you learn just as much as a creative director, especially a really good ACD that has a copy background. If the creative director has a little bit more of a design background, they might even be able to help you grow your skills even a little bit more. Yeah.
And I think these folks are really good sometimes too at getting you as a copywriter to kind of understand the business implications of what you're working on. I think a lot of times creative teams want to be as creative as possible. And by creative, we don't always mean clever again, or funny or anything like that, but you want to just kind of do what you think the best project is possible. And then sometimes they kind of have to be the bearer of bad news in the sense of reining you in and explaining, well, here's why from a business perspective, we don't want to go that route. Even if you feel like, oh, but this is so cool. And this is such like this, if the client would just let us put this out, like it would perform so well. But you're managing a lot of humans and a lot of different thoughts. And so sometimes they're really good at kind of making sure that, yes, it's the best possible, but also meets the objectives of whoever you're ultimately delivering it to.
Exactly. And then actually, before we leave the creative team to talk about other roles, you might work with other copywriters. There's certainly teams that are big enough that have multiple designers and multiple copywriters.
Yeah. And depending on how they structure it too, you might have junior copywriters, senior copywriters, a copy manager potentially, which I feel like copy manager, ACD, depending on the organization, it might be a similar-ish role.
Mhm.
But that said, you might report to another copywriter, or you might have to collaborate with other copywriters on a certain project. If you have a really big project that needs to get done, you might all be responsible for coming up with a concept for it. And then each person kind of, okay, you're going to write the banner ads and we needed this landing page. So you're on that. And so you're all then, yes, you're hopefully working from one concept that you're all very familiar with, but it all still has to hang together. And so you're going to want to really talk closely with all of them. And obviously, if you're not working on a project with them, still using them as a resource to bounce ideas off of. And, in any organization, I think when you're kind of all, hey, I'm a copywriter and you're a copywriter, there's that chance for like competition and feeling like, oh, but I want to be better than you. But the more that you can see each other as colleagues and as collaborators and all working toward the same thing, the better both of your projects are going to come out, both of your careers are going to progress.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And I do kind of miss this doing more freelance work now, but it's so much fun to be working on a line and be like, oh, I think this might do it. And then go to your copywriting buddy and within the organization, your copywriting peer, and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or even like this, I'm totally stumped by this. Help me see this from a different angle, still on the copy side, but help me see this, help me think this through. Yeah. Do you have 20 minutes to pop into a conference room and we can just do some concepting, do some brainstorming? I think I agree that I think there's that tendency, especially if someone is a newer copywriter and maybe hasn't had the opportunity before, to think like, ooh, am I competing with them for work? Am I competing with them for projects? No, you're really not. It's more than anything else, it's a really great opportunity to work with someone who gets what you do, which is amazing.
Yeah. And to push you to be better. And so you're both kind of coming from different perspectives and sharing bring different experiences to the table, to the same project potentially. How cool that you can then learn and grow from that. Mm-hmm. I'm going to share one example of a great reason that a copy team can be so helpful before, other folks catch little mishaps. So I don't know if you remember this, Nicki, but this was back when I worked for you, still work for you, but you know what I mean? 10 years ago plus now. And we were writing, it was about some hotel and it was in somewhere out west in the Rockies during winter ski season. So I wrote a line like white powder served on a silver spoon or something like that. And at the time, I think neither of us caught it. And so I like turned it in. You were like, oh, this is super fun. Yeah. Cause it was all about skiing and it was all like snow and powder and, woo, skiing. Other copywriters on the team immediately had that reaction.
Clearly like, less innocent copywriters.
Yeah. Like, hello. And there were a couple of our lines I remember on that team where we wrote them and people were like, you missed that really weird undertone and connotation. And that could be taken this way. And it was like, oh, duh. Like, not what I meant.
Clearly not what
I meant. Yeah. But it was really nice to have folks catching that before then presenting it to the rest of the team and having people be like, really, this got through how many layers and now you're presenting it to us as the final copy? And hello.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the more I always love the stories about stuff that gets through that shouldn't have, like the Chevy Nova, this car from many, many years ago, but they released it in the States, and they also released it, I think it was in Mexico, maybe some other Spanish speaking countries, but they released the Chevy Nova, but they never checked it with any of the Spanish speaking. I assume they must have had some Spanish speaking people on the team. Mm-hmm. They also didn't check it with any of the dealerships down there, because in Spanish, Nova means doesn't go. Which is exactly what you don't want your car to say. Welcome to our new car. Or introducing our new car. It doesn't go.
It's basically a fancy flower planter now that sits in your yard.
Yes. I mean, obviously it would go, but it would be like, yay, United States. Here's the Kia, and the new Kia model name is sits in your yard. Yeah. So that's the thing, is that having more people on your team are more opportunities to catch stuff and come up with better ideas and challenge each other. And it's such a great opportunity to work with a great, and not just the creative team, but like good project managers, good product managers, good marketing managers. And then also too, on some tech teams, you might even get an opportunity to work with some of the developers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You might say, "Oh, I have this idea for, again, website where, oh, does this functionality work? Like if we had someone click this, can this happen? And this changes color and this, not that wild, but knowing what the possibilities are and being able to ask that person, hey, is this doable? Could we do this? How cool would this be if this was the user experience? And like your couch scenario, can we drag this and have people able to drag and drop things on this page? And if so, that might change the copy too slightly. If that's the functionality, you want to make sure the copy then speaks to what they can do. Hey, drag and drop to look at your new living room. Plug in your dimensions of your basement and see what you can do. So knowing what the capabilities are will allow you to then A, come up with a better final product, but B, make sure the copy then matches what the experience is.
Exactly. Yeah. It's the more people looking at a product/project from different angles, the better it can be, and the more collaborative. I mean, you and I have been very fortunate to work in companies that very much encouraged collaboration, that was regular. It was common that we would go and collaborate with developers or be like, hey, so what do we think about this? Could that be a thing? And which you don't necessarily see in every organization, but it's so beneficial. And I would say too, in general, don't be afraid to ask or to get to know people, or, because it can only benefit you. It can only benefit the projects if you have a good relationship with all of these different people who will touch this project at some point.
Yeah. And the one other one, which I mentioned earlier, the account manager, which I realized we kind of skipped over at the beginning, but these are folks that, I'd say, only in an agency, any organization where you're working with external clients. So the account person is going to be in charge of really interfacing with that client. And sometimes you'll be all in meetings together and you will hopefully get a chance to talk with the client, and the account person will be there. But the account person often works even more closely with the client, and will translate, hey, the client mentioned this. Here's what I think that means for this project. And, sometimes clients don't like telling the creative team something directly. They don't want to be the bearer of bad feedback. And so that account person might have to be the one that kind of plays that middleman role.
Yeah. And let's actually talk about an in-house creative team versus an agency creative team. So an agency creative team is what Kate was just describing. They do work for other companies. So the agency's whole purpose is to do work for other companies. That's your Mad Men kind of company. That's your I'm trying to think of big.
Wyden and Kennedy.
Exactly. Your
Ogilvy, all those big names that you hear.
Exactly. Those, and smaller too. There's certainly plenty of small marketing agencies or small ad agencies, but they don't do work for themselves, and they may periodically do an ad for themselves, but all of their work is for external clients. An in-house team, though, is a little bit different. You still have a lot of the same people, except for maybe the account person, but they work within a big company for to do the creative work for that big company. So a company like Target, for example, I know that they also hire external agencies often to do their TV spots, that kind of thing. But I also guarantee that they have an internal team that does signage and does the circulars and does potentially even their website as well. So you can have an agency position. You can work out of the house. I think I might be making that up.
It's in-house, then
I've
that's
only
out
been
of
doing
the
this for
house.
20 years. Yeah, right. Maybe I just really want to get out of the house.
Yeah.
But you can work in an external team. That's what I was meant to say. An external team and an agency, or you can work on an internal team. You can work in-house within a company. So those, you're not necessarily, I think people think like, oh, working as a copywriter, I have to be working at an agency. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, Kate and I have done both. We've worked in-house, we've worked at external agencies, and they both have pros and
we
cons.
freelance with both too,
We
I should
freelance
say
with
too.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's another good point. Don't make assumptions about internal agencies would never hire a freelancer, or external agencies would never
they
hire
will.
a freelancer. They absolutely will. They absolutely will.
And you'd still, even if you're not on the team, good agencies that are working with freelancers make you feel part of the team and make you feel like, I shouldn't say make you feel like, you do end up working with a lot of these roles then, because they want that same experience. I think the more that we're siloed and detached, and I know you probably see that word a lot, of like silos and how bad they are, because the more that you can communicate with people and you're not just off on your own, which yes, a lot of the work will be done off on your own, but the more that you can collaborate with these folks and the more that you understand not just the project, but the whole, how it fits into the whole marketing plan, business plan, the better then your work will be, because you'll have a greater understanding of how your one piece fits into this big picture.
Exactly. Collaboration is the name of the game. And now, hopefully, after this episode, you feel much more prepared to collaborate with these people, and you know what you're getting into, and you know who you're meeting with and exactly what they do. So that's what we've got for you. And for more, catch us back on the next episode. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. Make sure you don't miss any tips, tools, or tactics for copywriters by clicking subscribe right now. And of course, you can always find us over at filthyricwriter.com. We'll see you next time.